One moment can change everything. One conversation can reveal the truth. And one decision can rewrite the future. Tonight, an undercover CEO walks into his own restaurant expecting just another meal, but what he hears behind him stops him cold. If you love stories filled with twists, surprises, and deep life lessons, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. The city was alive with its usual hum, cars rushing by, distant chatter from late-night walkers, and the occasional honk from impatient drivers. Ethan Caldwell sat behind the wheel of his black sedan, staring at the glowing neon sign of Grill Haven through the windshield. This place wasn't just another restaurant. It was his dream turned reality. But tonight, something felt different. He took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel. The rumors had reached his ears weeks ago, whispers of rude employees, unhygienic kitchens, and even customers being treated poorly. At first, he dismissed it. He had trusted managers running the chain, people he had handpicked himself. Could they really have let things go this bad? The only way to know the truth was to see it firsthand. Which was why tonight, he wasn't here as Ethan Caldwell, the CEO. He was just another customer. His disguise was simple but effective, a worn-out hoodie, faded jeans, and old sneakers. He even let his usually well-groomed hair stay messy and unshaved for a week, making him look like an everyday man struggling to make ends meet. Sliding his phone into his pocket, he whispered to himself, "Let's see what's really going on." Then he stepped out of his car and walked through the doors of his own restaurant. First impressions: the moment he stepped inside, Ethan took in the atmosphere. It didn't feel right. Something was missing. Usually, Grill Haven had a warm, welcoming vibe. The smell of freshly grilled patties, the upbeat chatter of happy customers, and the friendly greetings from staff. But tonight, the place felt cold. A few customers sat scattered across the tables, their expressions neutral at best, annoyed at worst. No cheerful laughter, no lively conversations, just people eating in silence. Ethan's eyes shifted toward the counter where a young female cashier stood. She looked bored, chewing gum, barely acknowledging the customers. A man in front of her, probably in his late 50s, was struggling to read the menu. I think I'll get the classic cheeseburger meal," the older man said, adjusting his glasses. The cashier sighed dramatically and rolled her eyes. "Yeah, sure. You want a drink with that or what?" Ethan's jaw tightened. That was strike one. He had trained his employees to be polite and patient with every customer, especially the elderly. This was not the standard he had set. Still, he remained quiet, stepping into the line. The manager's attitude behind the counter. A man in his mid-40s walked out of the kitchen. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, his name tag reading, "Carl Manager." Ethan studied him closely. Carl had been with the company for almost 3 years. He was supposed to be one of the best. But something about the way Carl moved, casual, uninterested, borderline lazy, rubbed Ethan the wrong way. Then he saw something that made his stomach turn. A teenage employee, probably no older than 16, was struggling to carry a tray of dirty dishes toward the back. The boy's hands trembled as he tried to balance everything. Right as he was about to reach the kitchen, one of the plates slipped. Crash! The sound echoed through the restaurant. Everyone turned. The boy froze, his face turning ghost white. Carl, the manager, marched over. "You little idiot!" Carl snapped, grabbing the boy's arm. "How hard is it to carry a damn tray? You think we got time to clean up your mess?" Ethan's fists clenched. That was strike two. The boy stammered, clearly terrified. "I am sorry, sir. It was an accident." Carl scoffed. "An accident? You think that's an excuse? You're lucky I don't fire you on the spot." Ethan had seen enough. He wasn't going to stand by and let this happen. But just as he was about to step forward, he heard something behind him. The whisper that changed everything. Two boys, sitting at a booth near the counter, were speaking in hushed voices. They looked to be around 12 or 13 years old, dressed in school uniforms that had seen better days. Their trays were nearly empty, just a small order of fries and a shared drink between them. One of them, a boy with slightly messy brown hair, leaned closer to his friend. "Do you think we should ask?" he whispered. The other boy shook his head quickly. "No. They'll probably just kick us out." Ethan furrowed his brows. "Ask what?" Then the first boy spoke again, his voice filled with hesitation. "But we haven't eaten all day." Ethan froze. The weight of their words hit him like a punch to the gut. These two kids weren't just sitting there to hang out. They were hungry. And from the way they clutched their fries and sipped their drinks so slowly, it was clear they were making the little they had last as long as possible. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just bad management anymore. This was something deeper. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Because this was about to become so much bigger than just a restaurant. The weight of the boys' conversation hung heavy in the air. Ethan's heart pounded as he replayed their words in his mind. But we haven't eaten all day. He turned slightly, stealing another glance at them. The two boys sat hunched over their tray, carefully rationing their fries as if they were gold coins in a world of scarcity. Their clothes, though clean, had seen better days, and their shoes were scuffed, the laces frayed. This wasn't just a case of two kids being picky eaters. They were struggling. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. How was this happening in his own restaurant? He had built Grill Haven with the promise that it would be a place for everyone. A place where families could gather, workers could grab a decent meal, and no one would be treated differently based on their wallet size. But tonight, everything he saw, the disrespectful cashier, the abusive manager, and now these two hungry kids, made him feel like he had failed. Still, he wasn't here just to get emotional. He needed answers. So he took a deep breath and stepped forward in line. A customer or a nuisance? The cashier, the same girl who had sighed at the elderly man before, barely looked up as Ethan approached. "What do you want?" she muttered, tapping her nails against the register. Ethan kept his voice level. "Just a burger and fries. No drink. No drink," he said, his mind still on the two boys behind him. The cashier lazily punched in the order. "That'll be $8.99. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. He had left his credit cards, designer wallet, and expensive watch at home. Tonight, he was just another customer. The girl snatched the bill from his hand, barely hiding her annoyance. She shoved his change back at him without a word and turned away before he could even move aside. Strike 3. Ethan took his receipt, but instead of walking away, he casually leaned on the counter, pretending to check his phone. His eyes flickered to the kitchen window, where he could see part of the food prep area. And that's when his stomach turned. Cutting corners at a cost, a young cook, barely in his 20s, stood over the grill, flipping patties with a rushed, nervous energy. His uniform was stained, his hair net barely covering his unkempt hair. Ethan's attention locked onto the stack of burger buns beside him. Some of them were slightly stale, edges hardening. They were reusing old stock. Then the young cook dropped a patty on the floor. For a moment, the cook froze, eyes darting left and right as if waiting for someone to yell at him. But when no one did, he hesitated, then picked it up, brushed it off, and slapped it onto a bun. Ethan felt sick. This was his restaurant. His name was attached to every meal that left this kitchen. If this was happening here, in just one random location, how many others were running the same way? His thoughts were interrupted when he saw the manager, Carl, walk back into the kitchen. Carl barely spared a glance at the food prep. Instead, he reached over, grabbed a handful of fries from the warmer, and stuffed them into his mouth before strolling back to the front. No washing hands. No gloves. Just blatant disregard for the business. Ethan had seen enough. The boy's silent plea his order was ready. The same disinterested cashier shoved the tray onto the counter without even calling out his number. He grabbed it and turned toward the dining area. As he walked past the two boys, he noticed something. They weren't eating anymore. They were just staring. Not at him. At his food. Their eyes flickered to the warm, freshly cooked burger on his tray, the golden fries still steaming. One of them swallowed hard, but they both quickly looked away, pretending not to care. Ethan felt a pang of something deep in his chest. They were hungry. Really hungry. And yet they were too ashamed to ask for help. Ethan couldn't let this go. He walked straight to their table and placed his tray down. The boys stiffened, exchanging wide-eyed glances. "Hey," Ethan said casually, pulling out a chair across from them. "Mind if I sit here?" The boys hesitated but nodded slowly. Ethan leaned forward, pushing the tray slightly closer to them. "I got too much food. You guys want some?" The brown-haired boy shook his head quickly. "And no, we're okay. We're not beggars." Ethan smiled gently. Pride. He understood it well. "I didn't say you were," Ethan replied smoothly. "I just don't like wasting food. And honestly, I'm not that hungry." The second boy, a little more hesitant, stared at the burger, then at Ethan. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Positive. Ethan nodded. The hesitation lingered for a few more seconds, but then hunger won. The second boy carefully reached for a fry, as if afraid someone might yell at him. When nothing happened, he took another. Then another. The first boy gave in too, grabbing the burger and taking a careful bite. Ethan said nothing. He just watched them eat, watched as their faces changed from hesitation to relief. And then, as they ate, he asked, "You guys come here a lot?" The boys exchanged a look. "Sometimes," the first boy admitted. "But we don't always have money." Ethan frowned. "Do they ever give you anything?" "Leftovers, maybe?" The boys shook their heads. "No," the second boy murmured. "We asked once, but the manager said if we didn't have money, we shouldn't be in here." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Carl." He had already seen the man's disrespectful attitude toward staff, but now, knowing he had turned away hungry kids without a second thought, that was the last straw. Ethan Caldwell wasn't just going to sit by anymore. It was time to show them who they were really dealing with. Ethan sat there watching the boys eat, his mind racing. This wasn't just bad customer service, this was neglect, cruelty, and a total disregard for basic human decency. And it was happening under his own brand in a restaurant carrying his name. He had spent years building Grill Haven into something more than just a fast food chain. He wanted it to be a place where people felt welcome, where no one was treated differently because of their financial situation. But what he had seen tonight, it shattered him. The rude cashier. The manager, Carl, treating customers like garbage. The cook using food that should have been thrown away. And now these two kids hungry, struggling, ashamed. He had two choices. He could walk away, let his corporate team handle it later, file a few complaints. Or he could handle it right now. Calling out the manager, Ethan straightened in his seat and looked at the boys. "You mind staying here for a bit?" They hesitated, but the younger one nodded. "Yeah, why?" Ethan smiled, though there was a storm behind his eyes. "I just need to fix something real quick." He pushed his chair back and stood up. Then, in front of the entire restaurant, he called out loudly, "Excuse me, where's the manager?" The room went silent. Customers turned to look at him. Even the cashier froze. Carl, who had just been stuffing another handful of fries into his mouth, looked up, annoyed. What do you want now?" Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "No more undercover act. I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Silence. First, there was confusion. A few customers glanced at each other, as if trying to place the name. Then the cashier's face drained of color. The cook in the kitchen nearly dropped the spatula. And Carl? He just froze. Because now he recognized him. The same man he had ignored. The same man he had talked down to. The man he had treated like a nobody. He wasn't just another customer. He was the CEO. Reality sets in. Ethan crossed his arms and stared Carl down. "I own this company," he continued, his voice calm but firm. "And I just watched you treat customers like trash. I watched you let employees slack off. I watched food fall on the floor and get served. And worst of all," his gaze flicked to the two boys, "I just learned that you turn away kids who are hungry." Carl's mouth opened, but no words came out. The cashier? She looked like she wanted to disappear. Ethan took a slow step forward. "Tell me, Carl, what kind of business are you running here?" Carl stammered. Look, sir, I didn't know who you were, okay? I mean, if I had known." Ethan cut him off. "You think I care about how you treated me?" His voice sharpened. "What about the elderly man you dismissed? What about those boys who were too afraid to ask for help because they knew you'd turn them away?" Carl swallowed hard. I was just following the rules, sir." "Really?" Ethan tilted his head. "Because nowhere in our policy does it say we're supposed to ignore customers, serve unsafe food, or let managers steal from the kitchen." Carl flinched. Ethan turned to the cashier. "And you?" She trembled. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to what? Be rude? Ignore customers? Not even make eye contact?" Ethan shook his head. "You don't even enjoy working here, do you?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. Ethan exhaled. He wasn't here to humiliate people, but he was here to fix a broken system. And it started now. Immediate changes. Ethan looked around at the restaurant. Customers were still watching in stunned silence. "Well," he said, his voice steady, "since I clearly can't trust this store to run properly, let me make a few things clear." He turned to Carl first. "You're fired." Gasps rippled through the room. Carl's face went red. Wait, sir, please. I need this job. Ethan's jaw tightened. You had this job, and you used it to treat people like dirt. I won't tolerate that. Carl looked defeated. But Ethan had already moved on. He turned to the cashier. As for you, I don't like firing people without giving them a chance to improve. He studied her face. Do you want to keep working here? She hesitated. Then, in a small voice, she said, no. Ethan nodded. Then you don't have to. He pulled out his wallet, took out $500 in cash, and set it on the counter. For your fresh start, he told her. Go find something you actually care about. The girl burst into tears. Then Ethan turned to the cook in the kitchen, the nervous young guy who had looked overworked and overwhelmed. You. The cook flinched. Ethan's voice softened. How long have you worked here? 6 months, the guy stammered. Do you even like it? The cook hesitated, then shook his head slowly. Ethan nodded. Then we're going to fix that. Because if this place was run the way it was supposed to be, you wouldn't look so stressed. You wouldn't feel like you have to cut corners to survive. The cook blinked in shock. Ethan continued. Starting tomorrow, this location is getting a full staff retraining, a new manager, and a company-wide audit. Then he turned to the customers. This is my company, he said. And this, he gestured to the mess around him. This isn't who we are. A few people nodded. Others murmured in agreement. But then Ethan did something no one expected. A CEO who cares. He walked back to the boys' table. They stared at him wide-eyed. Ethan smiled. You guys still hungry? Slowly they nodded. Ethan turned toward the counter. Make them anything they want. On me. Then, he pulled another $500 from his wallet and set it on the table. For you and your family. Get yourselves something good to eat. The older boy's eyes welled up with tears. The younger one whispered, Thank you. Ethan put a hand on his shoulder. No need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. What? When you see someone struggling one day, help them. The boy nodded quickly. And just like that, Ethan knew he had made the right choice. Before we jump in, if you believe in treating people with kindness and respect, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share this with someone who needs to see it. Let's spread the message together. Ethan Caldwell had done what he came here to do. He had exposed the corruption in his restaurant, fired an unfit manager, given second chances where they were deserved, and most importantly, helped 2 kids who just needed someone to care. But he wasn't done. This wasn't just about one restaurant. If this had been happening under his nose at one location, who was to say it wasn't happening at others? It was time for real change. A team arrives as Ethan stood near the counter, ensuring the boys got a proper meal. The front doors swung open. In walked a team of corporate supervisors. People he had called before revealing himself. They were the best of the best, his trusted right-hand team. They took one look around and immediately understood. The lead supervisor, a woman named Jennifer, stepped forward. She had worked with Ethan for years. Smart, tough, and absolutely no nonsense. She crossed her arms, surveying the shaken employees. Which one's Carl? She asked. Carl, still looking stunned and pale, slowly raised his hand. Jennifer didn't even look at him. She turned to Ethan. Is he fired? Ethan nodded. Good, Jennifer said, then glanced at the cashier. What about her? Ethan looked at the young woman who still had tears in her eyes from earlier. She's leaving on her own terms. Jennifer simply nodded and pulled out a clipboard. All right, she said. Effective immediately, we're shutting down this store for 24 hours for a full-scale evaluation. The entire staff is being placed under review. Every complaint from customers will be investigated. And from now on, there will be surprise inspections across all Grill Haven locations. Carl gulped. The cook looked relieved. The customers? They started clapping. Restoring the brand's honor as Jennifer and her team took over, Ethan took a moment to look around. This was his company. His dream. But somewhere along the way, people had lost sight of the values it was built on. That was changing now. He pulled out his phone and started typing out a message to his corporate headquarters. Starting today, Grill Haven is launching a new initiative, Customers First. Every employee, from cashiers to cooks, will go through empathy and service training. Any manager caught mistreating customers or staff will be immediately investigated. Our brand stands for community, and it's time we prove it. He hit send. The ripple effect of what happened here today would spread, not just to this restaurant, but to every single one. A personal conversation. As things settled, Ethan returned to the boys' table. They had clean plates in front of them now, full stomachs for the first time in who knew how long. The older boy looked at him, still trying to wrap his mind around what had just happened. "You really own this place?" he asked. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, but I didn't start like this. I grew up like you, actually." The younger boy tilted his head. "You did?" Ethan nodded. "I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to go to bed hungry. And I know what it feels like when people look right through you." The older boy was quiet for a moment, then asked, "How did you get out?" Ethan leaned forward. "I worked hard. I didn't let my situation define me. And most importantly, I never let anyone tell me I wasn't worth something." The boy swallowed, looking down at his plate. "I want to do that too. I want to get out." Ethan smiled. "Then start now. Focus on what you can control. Get good at something, anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Just be so good they can't ignore you." The younger boy was listening intently. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to the older boy. "When you're old enough to work, if you still need a job, call this number. Tell them I sent you." The boy took the card slowly, carefully, as if it was made of gold. "I will," he said, his voice filled with new determination. A powerful goodbye. Ethan stood up, giving them one last encouraging smile. "Take care of each other," he said. The boys nodded. As Ethan turned to leave, he saw Jennifer approaching him. "Where to next?" she asked. Ethan looked at the restaurant one last time. Then, with a determined smile, he said, "The next location. We've got work to do." The fallout the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Undercover CEO exposes toxic restaurant manager. Grill Haven's CEO shuts down location for 24-hour overhaul. CEO steps in to help homeless kids after staff refuses them service. Social media was on fire. Customers shared their experiences, both good and bad, about various Grill Haven locations. Employees started coming forward, exposing toxic managers and unfair policies that had gone unnoticed for too long. Ethan Caldwell had expected backlash, but what he saw instead, a wave of support. People respected what he had done. They saw that he wasn't just another CEO sitting in a fancy office, blind to the real world. He cared, and that meant something. But Ethan wasn't done. One restaurant fixed wasn't enough. The cleanup begins. Ethan wasted no time. With Jennifer leading his corporate team, they launched an internal investigation into every single Grill Haven location. Reports flooded in about managers like Carl, people who had been abusing their power, treating customers and employees poorly. Those managers, gone. In their place, Ethan handpicked new leadership, people who embodied the company's original values. People who understood that a business doesn't thrive because of profits alone. It thrives because of the people who make it run. He also implemented mandatory training for all employees, teaching them not just customer service skills, but also empathy. "No one in my restaurants will ever be turned away because of how they look," Ethan told his corporate team. Ever again. A second chance for the right people. Ethan wasn't just about cutting out the bad. He believed in second chances too. Not everyone in that restaurant had been bad. The cook, the young cashier, they had been trapped under bad leadership. Ethan made sure they got proper training and fair wages. He even gave them both a raise. The cook, a middle-aged man named Ray, shook Ethan's hand with tears in his eyes. "I've worked in kitchens for 20 years, Ray said. "You're the first boss who ever gave a damn." Ethan just smiled. "Then it's about time someone did." A promise kept. A week after the incident, Ethan returned to the same restaurant. This time, things were different. The atmosphere was warm. Employees smiled at customers. The new manager, a woman named Maria, walked the floor, checking on guests, ensuring everyone was treated with respect. And then, at the same table where he had met them before, he saw them. The two boys. The older one, Jason, looked up and smiled. "Hey, Mr. Caldwell." Ethan smiled back. "Hey, kid." The younger boy, Tyler, was already digging into a burger. "This place is way better now," he mumbled between bites. Ethan chuckled. "I'm glad to hear that." Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out the business card Ethan had given him. "I'm keeping this," Jason said. "One day I'm gonna call that number." Ethan nodded. "I'll be waiting." And he meant it. A lasting impact. As Ethan left the restaurant, he knew this was just the beginning. Grill Haven was no longer just about fast food. It was about second chances. About fairness. About community. And as long as he was CEO, that would never change again. If you loved this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.